Okay, this here is my reply to 2 comments to my Star Wars diversity rant. I happened to see them in the community section, and I decided to go ahead and reply to these 2 people because they came at me kind of slightly on the wrong side of this whole thing. And since I can't really type messages because of something Google's put in play, I decided to do a video and reply that way because that's the only way I can do it right now. Plus, I didn't have anything else to do. So if you need to read these things for yourself, go ahead and pause the video at any moment when you see the actual post or whatever, because I'm not going to read these things line by line. I may have to do it with the second one, but not with the first one. Okay, so since Zarbon700 was the first one I saw, let me get with this one. White people like you aren't able to understand why non-whites want diversity because whites have never been heavily excluded from the media. Okay, you've got 3 problems here, Zarbon, and you came at me from the wrong angle. You stuck to your point, but it's completely off base, and I'll tell you why. The first thing is white people like me don't understand. Okay, that don't understand thing, we don't really understand each other as much as people think they do. You know, somehow white people are able to understand whites, but whites can't understand anybody else. That's all garbage. The second part is it's not about understanding. That is a defense mechanism so you can deflect criticism to keep with an irrational or illogical behavior. That kind of phrase has been used for so many decades. It's so old. It needs to be thrown away. Come with something better, because that's just not going to fly with me. Number 2, this is where you made your mistake. And that is, I don't understand why non-whites want diversity. I never specified non-whites. You cannot find it anywhere in the video where I said, hey, non-white people, why do you want diversity so much in your videos? I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about the lack of diversity amongst the villains. How did you not hear that? The reason why I focused on it was because the critics were saying, yay, diversity, we finally got it in Star Wars, when I was going, no, it was in the prequels. So nobody even paid attention. But because the prequels are some of the 3 of the most hated films out of the Star Wars franchise, they don't want to talk about it. But you saw a lot more women, you saw a lot more brown and black faces in the prequels of Star Wars. That's true. So that would be our first rodeo. Episode 1, the most hated film. But this film is just an extension of that. The Force Awakens is just an extension. So what's the deal? Okay, but I never specified non-whites. I wasn't talking to non-whites specifically. Okay, the next part is because whites have never been heavily excluded from media. Yes, that happened, but what do you want me to say about it? It didn't have anything to do with me, and it doesn't have anything to do with my argument. You're sticking to your point, but it has nothing to do with my video at all. I mean, what do you want me to say? I'm sorry that kind of thing happened. I don't live in the 1950s or 1850s or 1750s. I don't live in a past life where, yes, I held people back. I don't do that. The time period that I was born into, everybody's got equal opportunity. I live from the time I was born to 2016 and until I'm put in the grave. I don't live all this other stuff. I don't hate the North because they beat the South. I don't hate the fact that Alexander the Great may have conquered some of my ancestors or something. I don't get into that. It's fine to learn about it and say we won't go back to those days, but it's another thing to sit there and live in that time period. I live in 2016. Also, if the good, the bad, and the ugly had not happened throughout history, maybe some of us wouldn't be here. And that's the way I look at it. That's what calms me down. I don't sit here and focus on stuff like that. But anyway, do what you want. I can't control anybody. This is just my own view. Now, as far as the vast majority of media portrays whites as heroes, yeah, but we also get to play the most dastardly villains when it comes to diverse movies. This is something that I don't really see non-whites being able to play, because some social justice warrior will cry foul, and you know it to be true. The other part is, I can flip the script here on you and say that the vast majority of media portrays non-whites as sympathetic, angelic characters that will give you the shirt off their back and eat a bullet for you any day of the week. That's not always true. All you have to do is look at the prison system. You have women's prisons. You have the men's prisons, which are made up of whites, blacks, and blacks, whites, and Hispanics in population order. So that non-whites and women can play villains now, can't they? That's all I'm trying to say. But it seems like no matter how much any evidence I get, oh, you're a white man talking about diversity. How dare you? Also, if you don't know this, a lot of non-whites and even women would like to play the ultimate villain because usually the villain has the meatier role. Your hero tends to pivot off of your villain in these movies, and if you have a weak villain, you have a weak hero, and vice versa. Okay, now with the standard of beauty, no country or region can set this up. As much as people want to think there's some kind of white cabal saying that, you know, like if I went to China and looked at a magazine, there's a bunch of white people over there in the magazines. No, it's a bunch of Chinese people. If I went down to Mexico and was reading some of their magazines and watching some of their TV shows, y'all think I'm going to see a bunch of white or black people? No, it's going to be a bunch of Mexican people. It's because of the population. That's part of it. The other part is, back in the Middle Eastern countries, in the BC time period, exactly where slavery started, if you didn't know that, they used to kidnap fair-skinned white women and make them their concubines. The reason why they did it was because they thought these women were exotic and beautiful. Did they set the standard? Am I saying that? No. It's all perception. It's all subjective. It's out of the beholder. Whatever your standard is what you should worry about. I think that's what a lot of us need to focus on instead of letting what the government or what society tells us what's beautiful or not, because nobody tells me what's beautiful. I know what's beautiful in my own eyes, and that's it. I don't rely on you or anyone else to tell me that. I will tell you, though, that there's a lot of really dark-skinned black people that get shunned or harassed by society. Now, if you want to take up a cause and find out why, unless somebody's already beat you to the punch, by all means, make your own video and ask that question to YouTubers and see what kind of responses you'll get. Because I've seen it with my own two eyes. And I've actually seen it within the black community. Light-skinned African Americans and brown-skinned African Americans versus really dark-skinned African Americans. They will harass that darker-skinned person. So why? I don't know. Now, I know some people will try to twist it up and say, well, white people made black people hate their shades of blackness and all. That's all garbage. That's all deflection and trying to not take responsibility for your own actions. But dark-skinned people do get harassed by a lot of people in society. Why? Or they get shunned, let's put it that way. Why? I don't know. But there is no standard. It didn't start. It's not still going on. It hasn't ended or anything else. It's whatever you set. And that's all it is. Okay, now this next part, white people don't care about diversity because 90+% of movies, TV shows are like geared towards white people and all this other stuff. Okay, number one, you didn't know where I got my information from. I looked at 14 different critics, reviews, whatever, and out of the reviews, they were all kind of covering up the fact that the movie was cut and paste from the 77 Star Wars film, and they were all jumping for joy about the diversity, which made me do this video, or maybe do the other video in question. And out of those reviewers, 14 now, 12 were white, 2 were non-white, and they all were saying the same thing. They were championing the diversity and glazing over the whole cut and paste job. So white people do care about diversity. Now, I'll tell you where you would be right. If we were talking about a movie like Friday, where it's going to be filmed in a small neighborhood and it's going to be about the ghetto, if it's an all-black cast or predominantly black cast, nobody will blink an eye. Because how many white people, Asians, or Hispanics live in the hood? Not that many. It's going to be at least 90% or 95% black, cast, right? So nobody will blink an eye. But Star Wars is not about a neighborhood. It's not about a country. It's not about a planet. It's about billions of planets in another galaxy somewhere. So you have many possibilities for a bit broader diversity base. The problem I have with diversity, and it's the only problem, is predictive programming. When they try to shove certain agendas in our faces just because they want to. Because they're trying to normalize certain things. It's kind of like tattoos and piercings. Tattoos and piercings in America were not fashionable. There was no such thing as a Gothic community and all this other stuff. Only prisoners, bikers like Hell's Angels, soldiers, and gangbangers and whatever, they would have tattoos, but it wasn't fashionable. And the piercings too. Nowadays, if you don't have a piercing or a tattoo, you're almost looked at as abnormal. And that's because of what Hollywood, the magazines, the celebrities have pushed over all these years. That's all it is. So they do have predictive programming where they push this stuff and they kind of normalize it. And by the time you notice it, or by the time it's in your face, it's bold and in your face, you're like, oh, it's kind of normal. That's how it works, and that's what I don't like, certain agendas. Not everybody agrees with every agenda they're trying to push. I think you know that. Okay, now I want to get into HaJ. HaJ says that he doesn't like the way I talk. Too much extra talking is distracting him. Okay, or her, could be her. HaJ, I'm not exactly sure I like the way you wrote this whole thing. I mean, this thing's kind of all over the place. I don't usually get, trying to talk about grammatical errors or anything like that, but it was really hard to decipher your comment here. It really was. And I'm not sure if you're a troll, a kid, or English is just not your primary language. I don't know. It's hard to read this thing, and I felt like Sherlock Holmes without the outfit and the pipe here. Anyway, I'm glad you do agree that diversity in and of itself is not something that should be just shoved into a movie. It should make sense. Then I don't think anybody have a problem with it. But and I'm glad we agree on that. Now, with your last sentence here, I wasn't sure how to read it. It says basically you wanted me to go further into depth with Finn's racial stereotype, but you wish I had more evidence to do that, and then you go on to say, basically to contradict yourself and say that you didn't think there was much of a stereotype to begin with. Did you mean you wish I had not talked about Finn's racial stereotype? Because I don't usually talk about stereotypes. When I gave out my opinions about how I felt the characters were, I was just talking about that. I don't usually go into stereotypes, even if you can read stereotypes in it. Well, that's a stereotype. I don't think in terms of stereotypes, because the problem with stereotypes is I actually see them in real life. Doesn't matter what stereotype we're talking about. I've seen people act just like the stereotype, and some people think that the movies are copying. We're copying the movies, but I think it's the other way around. And I don't really get into it. A lot of people, they don't want to see the stereotypes because it reminds them too much of themselves. And then there's another argument that they just don't want the same, whatever people they are, that's having these stereotypes, getting painted with that same broad brush. And I can understand that argument. Only ignorant people will paint everybody with the same broad brush, like all black people are the same, or all Latinos are the same, and all that garbage. I don't really get into it. But I did speak about when Finn said, "Droid, please." And the problem I have with that is that I don't think it really belongs in Star Wars. It would be almost like the equivalent of when Kylo Ren stabbed Han and he said, "Hasta la vista, baby." Or if he said, "Say hello to my little friend." That wouldn't work with Star Wars. It doesn't belong. And Star Wars should have its own dialogue, its own cool catchphrases that we steal from it, not the other way around. It's a nitpicky argument at best. I'll admit that. And I did speak about it. But my problem is that I don't want them to stoop to any level and steal from us or steal from another movie. That's what a spoof movie would do. They need to stay true to themselves and be original with their dialogue. That's just what I think. But I don't think it stacks up anything close to the lack of diversity amongst the villains. And as I said before, the only reason why I even focused on it was because the critics were acting like, yay, we've got diversity in the heroes. Well, we kind of had that in the last 3 films. And you just said nothing, and the villains would be something to champion, adding some diversity to it, outside of just one woman. But anyway, I hope that answered your question or whatever, because I don't usually, like I said, I don't usually think about stereotypes, because it's to me a wasted argument, and people try to deny that they even exist and all, and it's almost laughable sometimes. But anyway, that's my thoughts on it, guys. Peace.